So some of the recent takes about Patrick Mahomes are truly getting out of hand. He went from being taken out of the top 3 in the NFL to now no longer being in his prime years at the age of 29. Well, that's a lie, and in today's video, I'll break all that down and put this silliness to rest, give the most recent update on the future of Arrowhead, look at the best Chiefs players over the last 25 years, and more. But first, how about those? First up, we have a bit of an update on the future of the Chiefs and where they could end up playing in the future. As a reminder, the lease for Arrowhead expires in 2031, and so the organization is trying to figure out what's next after that. The thing is, decisions have to be made sooner rather than later because it's going to take years to get things going and either rebuilt or built from the ground up. So it's either put a bunch of money into updating Arrowhead along with the practice and training facility, the most likely option for Missouri if the Chiefs stay in Missouri, or getting a brand new state-of-the-art everything on the Kansas side of the state line. The least likely of the 3 options, but still an option nonetheless, is to get a brand new stadium built in Missouri. Now, here we go, update time. Earlier this week, it was reported by Kevin Keitzman of KCMO Talk Radio. I know he's not a popular name for some, but here was the update. The Chiefs organization had 5 pieces of land they had contracts on to purchase if they wanted to move over to the Kansas side of the state line. These potential locations is where a brand new stadium could be built after the leases expire, and they could play in said brand new stadium at one of these 5 sites. Well, Kevin said that a source of his told him the Chiefs have let those contracts expire and have canceled them, with the odds of them staying in Missouri seeming to be the way things were headed. Part of this was because the Star bonds that Kansas was offering were set to expire on June 30th. So I was like, if Kevin's source happens to be accurate, maybe they will be staying at Arrowhead after all, but not so fast, because yesterday, Mark Donovan, the president of the Chiefs, wrote a letter that was made publicly available asking for an extension of the Star bonds so that discussions and due diligence can continue on a timeline that reflects the scale and significance of the opportunity of having a stadium in Kansas. Basically, it's a very involved and complex decision that requires more time for them to make. Earlier on in this letter, by the way, Mark Donovan made it clear that the possibility being explored on the Kansas side was a world-class domed stadium, a new team headquarters, a state-of-the-art practice facility, and a vibrant mixed-use and entertainment district. Right now, I'm not really sure this means Kansas is a done deal or anything crazy, but if the Star bonds expired, the Chiefs would lose any leverage they had with the state of Missouri. An extension of the Star bonds, though, keeps Missouri on their toes because a move to Kansas could still be within the realm of possibilities. So I feel like the Chiefs are trying their damnedest to maintain leverage and keep the tug-of-war going on both sides of the state line to try and get the best deal possible, or to simply buy themselves more time to process through everything. Of course, if you look at it through the lens of the government officials in both Kansas and Missouri, they all act like they've won the quest. They're in the red zone, about to cross the goal line, a bunch of other cheesy but I don't really think that's the case, and it could still go either way for the time being. There's both pros and cons to what's being offered by Missouri and Kansas, and I won't bore you with all the details, but in simplest terms, Missouri is offering to cover up to 50% of the cost of a new stadium or renovated Arrowhead with a minimum project cost of $500 million. Meanwhile, on the Kansas side, they are offering to finance up to 70% of the cost of a new stadium with a minimum project cost of $1 billion. What Kansas is offering is quote-unquote technically better, but it would be way cheaper to renovate a stadium that is already in existence, and given the historic site Arrowhead is, this has to at least be highly tempting for Clark Hunt. If you remove the legacy of Arrowhead, though, and look at it only from a business perspective, I could see why a brand new stadium in Kansas could be pretty tempting. A dome, even a retractable dome, allows for events to be held there all year long, and it's the only shot KC ever has at hosting a Super Bowl. Even with a dome, though, there's still a slim chance because most Super Bowl sites are hosted in warmer climates during the month of February. Meanwhile, it's freezing cold in Kansas City. But hey, enough stadium talk for now. Just make sure to let me know your brutally honest thoughts on what you would like to see happen in the comments below. Next up, ESPN recently released their all-quarter century NFL team. So they built their best 53-man roster with players and coaches that are active or have played or coached since the year 2000. Well, there were quite a few Chiefs players and even a surprising Chiefs coach that made the cut. On offense, Mahomes was obviously ranked among the three. There was Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, then Mahomes, so he was penciled in even over Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees, which makes sense given the run Casey's been on since Mahomes took over as a starter. Seth Walder, one of the authors that wrote this article said that they've got to take peak Mahomes over peak Rodgers or Breeze based on the unbelievable throws, mistake avoidance, and even the postseason heroics. Next up on this all-quarter century team, many were surprised to see Priest Holmes at the top of the list. You can definitely argue others in on this list, even over Holmes, I guess, if you want to, but the 3-year run that he went on was one of the greatest in NFL history. 1,500 yards and 8 touchdowns, 1,600 yards and 21 touchdowns, and then 1,400 yards and 27 touchdowns just on the ground. He also averaged another 650 receiving yards in each of those 3 years during that stretch. This was obviously helped by having arguably the best offensive line in Chiefs history. You had Willie Roaf, Brian Waters, Will Shields, and John Tate, among others. Anyway, moving on for receivers, there's not a huge surprise that a KC wideout didn't make the list. Tyreek Hill was awesome, but not all quarter century awesome. But after that, tight end room. No surprises here. You had Rob Gronkowski, but then both Travis Kelce and Tony Gonzalez made the list, which is pretty wild to think about. The fact that a team could go from an all-time great in Tony Gonzalez to another all-time great in Travis Kelce in the span of roughly 5 years or so apart is nearly impossible. Yet here we are, with both Travis Kelce and Tony G making the Mount Rushmore of tight ends, at least on the list of most people out of everyone who played the position in NFL history. Then after no Chiefs players made the offensive line, there was a Chiefs player in the defensive end room, with that being Jared Allen. He really showed out his last year in KC, racking up 15.5 sacks before playing in Minnesota for 6 years and keeping up that very high level throughout. For the defensive tackle room though, surprise, surprise, just kidding, Chris Jones made the cut. 80.5 sacks, 13 forced fumbles, 3-time Super Bowl champ, and a 6-time All-Pro since being drafted. This is a no-brainer, and he's still the top defensive tackle in the NFL even today. And if you disagree, argue with a wall. That was then the rest of the Chiefs players on this list, with Andy Reid being edged out by Bill Belichick as head coach of the quarter century. However, Dave Toub found his way on there as the special teams coordinator. Their reasoning for this is that Toub coordinated a top 5 special teams unit every season from 2006 to 2017, including the playoffs, which is pretty insane. That streak was broken in 2018, by the way, when KC's special teams unit finished 6th, just 1 out of the top 5. All in all, it's safe to say that there's plenty of Chiefs greats over the last quarter century, and it's impressive to see 3 players on that list that are still active: Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Chris Jones. I'm sure you could try and argue in a couple more, but that's good enough for me. Speaking of all-time greats, though, let's get into it. I mentioned both Rob Gronkowski and Tom Brady in that all-quarter century team, and you know what's funny to me? While everybody is out there trying their damnedest to discredit Mahomes and Kelce, the Chiefs, the dynasty at every single turn over the last 7 or so years, Gronkowski and Brady are the ones going to bat for them. Tom Brady recently said on an episode of Cold as Balls with Kevin Hart that Mahomes is the guy in the NFL right now that can duplicate a version of his success. That's kind of a summary of what he was asked, just FYI, but Brady answered Patrick without any hesitation at all. Meanwhile, Gronk, last year he said there's really no doubt about it, Travis Kelce is the greatest receiving tight end of all time. But then, during the pregame coverage ahead of Super Bowl 59, Gronkowski went on record to say this: "I consider myself to be the best tight end to ever play the position, but after watching this guy," talking about Kelce, "the past few years, I'm starting to question that." So while the jobless Johnnies on social media try to discredit greatness, the same people they are saying are the GOATs are the ones that are immediately tipping their cap to Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, because greatness recognizes greatness at the end of the day. Another great one at what he does is, of course, Andy Reid, and PFF recently ranked him as head coach numero uno in the NFL heading into the 2025 season. They say this, that like Bill Belichick and Tom Brady with the Patriots before them, the Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes-led Kansas City Chiefs are the masters of situational football. They go from the 17th graded team on offense in the first, second, and third quarters all the way to the 4th best graded in the 4th quarter and overtime. It's like they flip a switch when the moments matter the most, finding ways to win excruciatingly close games despite struggling at other moments. During the 2024 season specifically, they did this with no wide receiver 1, Rice, no wide receiver 2, Hollywood, no running back 1, Pacheco, Kareem Hunt signed off the freaking couch week 3, a revolving door at left tackle, 4 different ones, no CB2, Watson, Snead traded away, and the list goes on. Nobody with that amount of injuries is making the playoffs, let's be clear here, let alone making it back to their 3rd Super Bowl in a row with a chance of a three-peat. That's why the chatter of Mahomes is no longer QB1 in the NFL is a very lazy take. The argument for that is Mahomes' stats have dropped off a little bit here the last 2 seasons. There's no real doubt about that. but I've already easily explained the quote-unquote regression and the reason for that in 2024 with all the injuries that hit the offense. Nobody did more with less on offense than Patrick Mahomes, and I would debate that to my grave. Then, if you look at the Chiefs wide receiver room in 2023, outside of Kelsey, who's obviously tight end, they had Rice, who had a solid year, but it took till the back half of his rookie season. But after that, Justin Watson, MVS, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, and McCole Hardman. They led the league in drops, but yet they managed to win their second Super Bowl in a row. It's actually getting absurd talking about the last 2 years of Patrick Mahomes and what people are taking that to mean. You have Chris Sims taking Mahomes out of the top 3, placing him as the 4th best quarterback in the NFL. And then most recently, not that the thought of this guy matters a ton, but you have people like Big Ben Roethlisberger saying, hey, I'm going to take Prime Rodgers over Mahomes. He said it was close. I mean, that's whatever to me. If you want the guy that's been to 1 Super Bowl and won 1 over the guy that's brought his team to 5 Super Bowls and won 3. But this is where it gets a little bit crazy to me. Big Ben said this. Shout out to Matt Connor of Arrowhead Addict. He found this clip from Big Ben's podcast. He said, well, I would take Aaron in his prime over Patrick now. I think Aaron Rodgers at his prime was one of the top few to ever do it, and so is Patrick Mahomes at his prime. But then he says this, Patrick Mahomes is just entering out of his prime. What are we doing? Patrick Mahomes is entering out of his prime at the age of 29 years old. He turns 30 in like September. How is he leaving his prime? Because he's had 2 quote-unquote down years after going nuclear? They trade away Tyreek Hill and then had the last 2 years that he just had based on the circumstances I just gave you, and that's what we're doing? This is getting ridiculous. There's no way that's your actual thought about Patrick Mahomes. He's past his prime. If you watch the games and the plays that he still makes with a lesser roster than Joe Burrow going nuclear with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I cannot wait for this year. So the media can go ahead with their cute little takes for clicks, but the reality is the dynasty is still around for a reason and will be a problem this upcoming season. You don't just drop off a cliff after making 7 straight AFC championships when you still have Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and Spags as the DC. I mean, these guys have made 7 straight AFC championships, 5 Super Bowls in 6 years. It's not happening. The Chiefs are going to be a problem this year, and don't let the media try to tell you different. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying this year is an automatic Super Bowl win or anything stupid, but the Chiefs will be dangerous threats in the AFC fighting for the top seed and yet another deep playoff run, and it's pretty ignorant to think otherwise. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on the dynasty and how you currently feel about them as we get ready for training camp. How high or low are you on them at this point in time, and what are your honest expectations of them for this year? Let me know either way in the comments down below, and until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?